Ben the Bar Guy back with another video to help you make better drinks. And today we're gonna do a video that's focused on training a bartending whisperer. What's that mean? That's where you train a manager on how to train your bartenders on a cocktail method so that your manager can train an entire staff. And I'm gonna do it with Lester, my guy at Reliable Tavern, who's taken over the program for me. There's no better time to do one of these videos. You ready, Lester?
Time to get trained.
Let's make better drinks. All right, guys, this has been the Bar Guy back with another video to help you make better drinks. And today we're focused on how do you make better drinks through other people? How do you spread the gospel of better cocktails by training people the right way to teach other people how to make great cocktails? And while you might think that's a distance learning situation where you're 2 steps removed from the actual bartender making something, I can't tell you how awesome it is to be able to watch the truth about cocktails be spread that way faster and farther than I ever could have imagined because of this method. It's much more efficient to really change the drinking culture in the area you're in. And I think Lester's a perfect example of somebody who believes not only in what we're doing and how we're doing it, but most importantly believes in why we're doing what we're doing. I'm gonna go through the training manual that I give to every incoming bartender at Reliable Tavern or anywhere else I've worked. I'm gonna give Lester the in-between the lines secrets behind this training outline that I gave every bartender. The first thing I always start with any bartender, and I get it from Simon Sinek, one of my favorite authors. I'll link a video to start with why, his TED Talk that is seminal in my structure of teaching. It's really about teaching somebody why you're doing something. And Lester, I can't make this more important to you. Telling somebody why you're doing something will bring people around you that believe in why you're doing something, not what you're doing. And people don't buy what you do, they always buy why you're doing it. People don't work for what you do. They work for why you're doing it. At Reliable Tavern, we had very little turnover. Like Lester, how long did you work at Reliable Tavern?
I've been here for over 3 years now.
Yeah, and Lester got hired because the bartender that was outgoing, he was already doing that guy's job because he already liked this bar so much. He already got it. Like he understood what we were about and why we were doing what we were doing early on. And it was like the easiest hire I ever made was Lester. It was a great hire. Why did you join Reliable Tavern?
I just wanted consistency, and this was one of the most consistent, accurate, efficient bars that I've ever been to. I watched someone be not as consistent. I also got to learn so much from being in this program. I got taught tremendous amount of knowledge that I wouldn't have had unless I came here, and I got to do all that to this guy sitting right here next to me.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I never thought that Reliable Tavern would have the actual influence that I used to say to people every time they worked for me. I would say the why behind what we're doing is to help you become the best bartender you can possibly be, so we as a group of professionals give the world better service and product today better than we did yesterday. And I used to say that to every bartender that came in, and I was like, we need to change the culture in Washington, D.C. on how cocktails are made and just make our footprint. And I'm gonna be honest, man, have we ever talked about what another bar is doing at our bar? Really, like, we don't care.
That doesn't really affect us as much as long as we're putting out the best product we can.
We were focused on us at all times, and we knew that if we had a system that made sense and connected with bartenders, we could be making better cocktails across DC. As a general manager, I always told my managers, every bartender who came in, including Les, was trained as a manager and was treated as a manager so that they could run the bar when they were here. And the point was, someday you're gonna be running a bar somewhere else. And we were investing in our employees. But if they wanted to leave, we knew they would also take a lot of what we learned and give it to other people, which was really what we wanted. We wanted to change the drinking culture in DC to make a cocktail tavern commonplace. That was our goal. And we have outstanding reviews at Reliable Tavern precisely because when people walked in, immediate impression was that they weren't gonna be impressed, and then they were. And over and over again, people were like, wow, this place really has great service. This place really has great bartenders. This place really has great product. And that all stems from no turnover in your staff so that your staff becomes comfortable and is good at their job by practice. And it also becomes from a system of making cocktails that helps the bartender make the best drink they can with the best possible tools and strategies to be consistent across the board.
I don't mind compared to other bars because I believe we're top 2 cocktail bar in DC and we're not number 2.
I like that. However, if you guys are in town, you should definitely check out Morris American Bar You should check out Astoria. You should check out Copycat.
Green Zone.
Green Zone. Absolutely. These are bars that are closely affiliated with us philosophically on how drinks are made. And while they're not the same, these are bars that have figured out a lot of what we figured out. How do you do that? Well, one of the things you do is you set up a training program based off of Sasha Petrosky, who, if you haven't watched our videos, I'll link a couple here. Sasha Petrosky's a legend, and he was definitely a bartender whisperer. And that's what I trained under him to become. And now I'm trying to train Lester to do that. It starts with our training guideline. I always start with safety, Lester, with your bartenders. If this stuff right here were safe, we would just serve it like yogurt at a frozen yogurt shop right out of the wall. People would just walk up and serve themselves alcohol. But it's not, because it is dangerous, and we have to respect that. The safety of guests is always first. The last person who serves a person who's inebriated is the person who's responsible, and that's often by law too. So safety is where we always start with bartenders. Then the one thing I always get across to bartenders is that cocktails are very simple. They're not that complicated, right? Cocktails are not about you being a bar chef or a bar sommelier.
Or a mixologist.
Or a mixologist. What does that mean, Lester? Do you know what a mixologist is?
Absolutely not.
I don't know either.
I've never seen the definition for a mixologist, and if you ever show me one, I will tell you that's ridiculous.
Mixologist is a term, came from Prohibition era. It was called that gangster run bar bartender. It was what you called him because he could make really bad bathtub gin taste okay in a cocktail with orange juice and Galliano. And somehow in the early 2000s, a lot of people picked up on it because they wanted to differentiate themselves from the bartender that was just slinging beers and shots. We should be treating cocktails as another drink that any bartender can make.
If you're currently in Prohibition now, then I feel bad for you. And then you can be a mixologist. But if you're not in Prohibition, and you're standing behind a bar, you are a bartender.
That's right.
Be a great bartender, not a mixologist.
Yep. And I always say that mixology is too small a word for what we do. If we were just studying mixing, which is the etymology of the word, this job would be a lot easier. That means we don't have to talk to anybody. We don't have to pour beers, know anything about wine. We certainly aren't pouring shots. That's not a mix, right?
Be responsible for our guests, which we love to do.
None of that would happen if we were just mixologists, but bartending includes all of that. So I've always said mixology is too small a word. But here's the thing. When Sasha was training me, one of the first things he said was, despite not being a mixologist, you're not a bar sommelier and you're not a bar chef, you're not making food out of cocktails. He said, there's two things you need to know intimately well to be a great bartender as far as cocktails go. You need to measure accurately and you need to get things cold. And as a subsidiary to getting things cold, you need to understand water content and ice. Ice is the foundation of everything. If you can get that across, those simple concepts to your bartenders, man, I can't tell you how important it is. The essence of everything. And that changed my life because I thought mixologists were the only thing I was gonna have to be around if I wanted to learn cocktails. That was a disaster for me. I was like, I can't be around these cocktailologists. I can't do it, you know? And then Sasha came in and was like, he was probably the king mixologist in everybody else's eyes, but he was downplaying that term. This is not about that. It's about measuring accurately, getting things cold, understanding water, and ice. And then here's the thing. He said, you're thinking that's simple right now, right? And I said, uh-huh. And he goes, in case you think that's too easy, you're gonna spend the next 6 months of your life figuring that out.
It's to the point where you have to be so accurate, your drink is measured in milliliters before and after you shake it.
I really view bartenders as cornerstones of their community. And prior to Prohibition, that really was what was up. 19 of 27 aldermen in New York were bar owners or bartenders on New York City's Alderman Council. I mean, that's amazing to me how influential bartenders were. And there's a simple reason. People were packed into tiny little apartments with their entire families. When I say entire families, it was grandma, grandpa, cousins, nephews, sisters, in tiny apartments that had a few rooms. You were sleeping 3 to a bed and you just needed to get away. Well, where did you go? Well, you went to the corner bar where the bartender who was your host for an evening of entertainment and drink. That made the bartender the mayor. And I don't think it has to be different now. Post-Prohibition, we got to the point where bartenders were just treated like it was a second job. And the profession went through a very bad phase where people just weren't trained to do a great job. If you want to see another video of what that was like and how unfair it is, go see the video on the worst cocktail ever made and see the story of JANEE NISONGER, who really was a good bartender for her day, but was treated as if she was an actress and she did bartending on the side, and she got kind of cornered into a situation where 4 million people now see her video and make fun of her because because she didn't make a cocktail the way she should have. And she didn't really have a choice that day.
That was her second job, was bartending. Her first job was being an actress. So she did the acting gig as a bartender and showed up horribly.
I believe that bartenders should treat their job as a professional as much as possible, at least when they're in the building. If they have another job, that's fine. I still hire people with second jobs, but I tend to weed them out because I expect them to be great at their job, and that takes time and practice and effort, showing up on time, taking their job seriously.
We look for dedication. This is an actual profession that you dedicate yourself to. If you don't dedicate yourself to it, you'll be constantly making horrible drinks and constantly making other bartenders who really care look worse.
Treat your bartenders as if they're cornerstones of their community. And I want my bartenders to be known in the community. I want them walking around and having everybody know their name. You know, the next thing I go over with bartenders and what I would express to Lester is teach them what a cocktail is and really focus on balance. Balance in a cocktail is a balance between your weak portion, which is usually sour and sweet. It's a balance between your alcohol in that sweet portion. So that's your strong and weak balance. And then at the very end, and this is often forgotten, unfortunately, the whole drink, weak and strong, is always balanced by the water content in the drink. And nailing that water content is what we focus on all the time here at Reliable Tavern. And Lester already mentioned it, but is we use graduated cylinders, and we'll have the bartender make a round of drinks and we'll have them measure them out. And when they measure them out, we will make sure that they're within 10 milliliters of a range of measurement, right? We want them to be accurate. And then we put that back into a tin and we tell them to shake it. And then we measure it after they shake, and we measure how much water we put in to every drink. We basically measure how much water you put into a drink with ABV, and we have ranges for every style of drink. So if your style of drink is a shaken up drink, then we have a range. So we measure the drink inside of a graduated cylinder, and the bartender has to get to a certain measurement range within 10 milliliters of the range of measurement. They have to be in that window. And then we have them shake the drink, and they have to hit certain ranges of ABV. Let's say it's a shaken up drink like a daiquiri. Well, that range for us is 17.5 to 22.5. Lester would, if he was training a bartender, would measure that out and then put it into a spreadsheet that tells him exactly what ABV that bartender had shaken the drink to. Every style of cocktail is at a different ABV. So if it was a stirred up drink, do you remember what stirred up drinks were?
Around 25%, I believe it was 24 to 28.
Yeah, exactly. 24.5 to 28.5. Stirred drinks need more alcohol to balance than a shaken drink with citrus. Then we have ranges for our stirred down drinks. And so we would tell bartenders, look, you really want to add about 1/2 ounce to 3/4 of an ounce of water in a shaken down drink, but you want to add 1 to 1 1/4 ounces of water in a shaken up drink. And they'd be like, well, why is that? I'd be like, well, if it's shaken down, which means shaken down on a big rock, that rock is going to give you water while the guest is drinking the cocktail. So you don't need to add as much water with your shake. So undershake it just a touch compared to a shaken up drink, and now you got a balanced drink.
And undershake your long drinks a little less than that because you're adding soda, which is also going to dilute the ABV.
Right on. So if you want soda to stand out in your cocktail, and we got a video on how to make a Collins where I go through soda bubbles and how to maintain soda bubbles on a Collins drink. That's exactly right. Like, you must shake less into that drink because it's on ice. That's going to help you chill the drink, but it's also going to allow you to pour more soda in. Right. And so these are the things that Les is going to get across to the bartenders who come in. And when they start thinking about those things, when you put that seed in their head, that grows into better cocktails real fast.
That becomes the tree where you can get your shade from.
There you go. So the other thing that really matters when you're training a bartender is teaching them to be efficient. The first thing I would say to Lester is make sure their bar station is set up to give you the least amount of steps possible. We set up a cocktail competition at one point with Morris American Bar. And one of the things that the cocktail competition was designed to do was actually make the comparisons fair from bar to bar. But one of the things we measured was how long it took you to do rounds. And then we also measured things like temperature of your cocktails. And when Morris came to Reliable, because we're obsessed with ice and we have lots of freezers and we don't put our ice in glass frosters and we put our glassware, we chilled our glassware with liquid nitrogen and they chilled their glassware and glass frosters, both of which we think are fine. We found that everyone was hitting temperature ranges, which we thought was like, oh, well, maybe our temperature ranges don't matter that much, you know, everybody's gonna hit them. Then we went to Morris and we all struggled to hit our temperature ranges far more, like there was far more variation in temperature, but you know what they all killed us on? Was timed. The timing of every round was markedly lower there, and the reason is that their bar station was set up. So what I would say to Lester is go watch other bars how they do things and don't necessarily necessarily think you have to imitate other bars, but always be on the lookout for how to make your bartenders more efficient using ideas that other bars are using.
You can always pick something up from somebody. Like they say, we learn something new every day.
Yeah, I don't model the business after any bar. Do what you think is best at all times and be guided by your why. But if you go to another place and they're making similar drinks to you and they believe in your why, but they're doing it a minute faster on average, we're doing something wrong. It turned out when we came back to Reliable, we found out that because of our construction and the way the bar had been built before we thought we were gonna be a cocktail-centric bar, that we just had a space problem, like where we basically were causing our bartenders to walk too much for stuff. It really is about keeping bartender steps consolidated and thinking about how they move behind the bar. Another thing is order of operation. I can't say how important this is. Teaching your bartenders to always pick things up once. And I've mentioned it in a few other videos that I can link here. Essentially, the order of operations is an absolutely essential way to make your bartenders efficient. And what it is, it's about picking things up once, measuring accurately, and then using cost of ingredient as the reason you pick things up in the order you do. So we always pick up citrus first, then our sugar, because generally those things are cheaper. We save our alcohols for last. If we pick up gin, we're pouring gin into every drink that needs it. We don't pick up gin 3 times to pour 2 ounces into every drink. In other words, we don't build drink A and drink B separately. We build them across. We build drink A and B at the same time. And if they both need gin, then we pick the gin bottle up once and we measure gin into each. If one gets lemon and one gets lime, we pick those up once, but they might both get simple syrup. Well, we simple syrup this one and this one at the same time. We don't put down the simple syrup and then pick it up later to build this drink. And just teaching bartenders that will make them infinitely faster. Here's another trick. Sasha came in and did a lot of metronome training. He stunned me one day when I was having trouble with a bartender who eventually took over the program for me at another bar, the John Dory Oyster Bar in New York. She was a little bit slow, but it wasn't because she was bad at bartending. She was being a little too careful and about measuring, and Sasha wanted to break that, so he said, look, this is how we're gonna do it. Have her download a metronome app, meaning like that app. He says set it on 90 beats per minute, have her pour water, so she's not wasting anything in her mind. Have her pour water into tins, pretending as if they're cocktails. Label something as lemon, but it's really just water. Label something as lime, but it's really just water. Measure everything in water and tell her we don't care if you spill. Go as fast as you can. At 90 beats per minute, I want every 4 clicks you to be done measuring with whatever you just picked up. So click 1, pick up the lime. Click 2, bring the lime over to your tin. Click 3, measure it into your jigger. Click 4, jigger it into and set down the lime. Jigger it into the tin and set down the lime. 4 clicks for everything, and she had to hit that. So it was click, 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 done with whatever she was measuring. And it was fascinating. She went from 12-minute rounds with 5 cocktails to 6.5-minute rounds in about an hour. So what I would say is try and pinpoint what is actually slowing your bartender down. And all that will really save them time, which means money for the bar. I can't express how important that is. Another thing that will help with the consistency of your cocktails is keeping the well spirits at a certain ABV at all times. So everything we use to make cocktails is at 86 proof or higher. You're giving your bartenders a wider range, margin of error that's bigger. And so your worst bartender and your best bartender can make drinks the same way because they have a wider range to miss. They can put an ounce of water or an ounce and a half of water in, and they're still making a drink that's balanced to the guests. And so if you use 80 proof spirit, there's not enough alcohol there, and what you get is not a big enough window for all of your bartenders to make the same drink. And if you ever go to a bar where you just want Jimmy to make your drink, if you just want Cindy to make your drink, Allison making your drink, that's what's happening. Like, they don't have good ice that gives the bartender a long enough shake, and then they don't have high enough proof in the well. The result is inconsistent bartending. But the only way to find that out is if you're using graduated cylinders and measuring how much water your bartenders are putting into their drinks. Are they missing on shaken drinks, shaken down drinks, stirred up drinks, stirred down drinks? Where are they missing?
Identify the problem first and then try to solve it.
Another thing that the order of operations gets into is ice last bartending, which really gets into the concept of durability. How long does a cocktail last sitting out on the bar before it's too wet, too diluted to be any good anymore and to be balanced anymore? Lester and I both will make drinks. We'll make drinks in a certain order to protect durability. Lester, you remember what the durability order of our operations was?
Start off with neat drinks, so there's no ice in that and it's just booze and have to dilute it. So that's gonna be the most stable that you can get. Then you move on to a colonies drink. Then it's shaken down, then stirred down. Then we go shaking up. There's also pebble ice drinks in between there before you go into your egg whites and stirred up drinks.
And there you go. If you make your drinks in that order, in other words, you shake your drinks in that order, your drinks will come out more consistent, almost like food comes out at a restaurant. They don't let something get cold while something comes out hot later.
If you're a chef at a restaurant and you have a ticket with a well-done burger and a medium rare steak, you don't put the steak and the burger on at the same time. You start the burger first, then you add the steak, and you pull it off at the same time so the food is both hot, both out to the guests. Same way we want our drinks to do.
You gotta have all the drinks at their peak optimal condition as best you can on the tray so that they're served to the guests and everyone's enjoying their drink in that perfect zone where the drink's exactly how it should be. And that's the last thing we talk about. We use big ice here because it gives the guests as long as possible if the drink is served on that ice. We use spears for Collins drinks and we use big rocks for drinks served in glasses like this, like Negronis and Old Fashions, because we want the guests to be able to choose when they want to drink. They want to drink it hot, that's great. They want a little more alcohol, they can drink it early and not let the ice melt very much. If someone wants a little more water melted in, they can sit with that drink for a while.
Either way, it's their option for how long it sits in front of them.
Giving the guests the option. And in a shaken up drink or a stirred up drink, we have our idea of what's balanced, and if the guests happen to say something to us like, hey, this was a little too boozy for me, maybe we'd put a little more water into it. But generally speaking, we're trying to hit those ABV ranges every time. And the only way to measure that is in training with a graduated cylinder, measure how much water they put in the drink, how much alcohol was in the drink to begin with, and figuring out what the ABV was at. And once the bartender gets that in their head, they'll start to have an idea where they're landing. But if you don't do it in training, they can't do it on their shift. So practice is important here. I worked for a year for Sasha before he came in and told me I was over shaking my shaken drinks and under stirring my stirring drinks, and then he just walked out. Like that was the conversation that day. I made like 6 or 7 drinks for him and his friend over the course of an entire lunch. Like that was the only thing he said is he put on his hat and left. Totally was like, oh, okay. And I like from that point forward changed what I thought was balanced when I straw tasted it, and that changed everything. Which leads to our next point actually. Straw tasting is
tasting your cocktails.
You gotta taste your cocktails. If you don't taste your cocktails, you don't know where you're at.
In the words of Sasha, you're an asshole for being a caipirinha and you don't straw taste it.
Yeah, because particularly a caipirinha is made by just crushing limes. You're actually not measuring the lime juice.
You're crushing limes and sugar cubes, so you don't know exactly what you're putting into that product.
And any bartender out there who's ever dealt with limes, if they come from California one day or Mexico from the next day, they can be completely different sizes. So when you're muddling a lime wedge for a caipirinha, it's totally different. But because you can't measure it in a caipirinha, you're muddling it, you have to taste. Sasha also meant that anytime you're making a drink, you should be tasting. And here's the reason. Wash lines are a big deal at Reliable Tavern. And the wash line is where the drink comes up to when it's finished and poured into a glass. Our glasses are all different sizes. This is a stirred drink glass. It's a little bit smaller. Maybe you could fit a daiquiri into it. This is the same. This is a stirred drink glass that you could fit a daiquiri into. This becomes more of a daiquiri glass because if you put a stirred drink in there, the wash line might be too low. And so we have different size glasses for different styles of cocktail that we're always judging the wash line on. And a good bartender will look at that wash line, then straw taste and say, okay, my wash line was good, but I'm tasting a little too much water. What do you think that means, Les?
You under-measured your weak or strong portion of your drink and you shook too long.
That's right. And so often the problem will be that they're leaning the jigger when measuring. They're either leaning it towards themselves or leaning it away from themselves, often to see the lines inside of a jigger. And that means you're under measuring. You think you're hitting a line that you're really not. And so if you're getting perfect wash lines, but it tastes a little watered down, which is what was happening to me with Sasha, I was leaning my jigger. And so once I figured that out, solved that problem, my drinks became better. What if your wash line's a little high, but your drink tastes balanced? What's going on then, Les?
Then you're over measuring. You're adding a little too much of your weak or strong portion and you're shaking properly. Right,
you're just going over your lines a little bit and you're over measuring, which means you're stealing not from the guests like you were in the previous example, you're stealing from your owners. Either way, that's bad. Now let's say you have a wash line that's a little low, but the drink tastes spot on. What's going on then?
Then you under measured and stirred properly.
You made the drink right, you're under measuring. In this one, you're actually making the drink perfectly. You're not over shaking it, but you're getting a low wash line because again, you're under measuring. What if your wash line's high and it tastes watery? What's that mean?
I mean, you probably measured correctly, but you shook or stirred for too long and added too much water.
And so when you teach your bartender this little method of straw tasting, once you know 2 pieces of information, you figure out the third, they can be self-correcting all the time, which means their shifts, when they're tasting drinks, become practice.
I mean, listen, we talking about practice. Not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice.
Right, and I can't tell you how important that is. You can't practice bartending. In your shift is kind of game time, right? It's game time. So how do you make yourself better during game time? Straw tasting. Now, as an aside, I always recommend bartenders come in and practice rounds from time to time. And we had a method and a way of doing that where bartenders could come in and ring spill tabs and practice, which was really important for us as a bar to do. Not every bar does that. So if you're a cocktail bar out there and you want your bartenders to get better, have them straw taste and learn the method of wash line and evaluating that wash line versus what they're tasting in the straw, and you're good. Here's another one, buddy. What if you taste a drink and it's too warm?
That means they didn't shake or stir long enough. Not only was it not diluted, probably didn't get the temperature to the right temperature. Pulled it off the ice too fast and it couldn't get cold enough.
At other bars, the ice cubes were wet. When you put them in, all of that water on the outside of a cube, if it was sitting wet in a well, goes right into the drink. It doesn't bring the temperature of your drink down. That energy was already given to the air surrounding the ice cube as it was sitting in the well. So oftentimes drinks with wet ice will come out warm, even though you know that the ice is wet and you're under shaking it a little because you know you have to. Eventually your drinks will get warm. If you're straw tasting, you need to go get your bar back and say, hey man, I need a new bucket of ice straight out of the freezer because my ice is too melted. At 11 p.m., are they making the same drink that they were making at 5 or 6 p.m.? Because they had their bar back, go get another bucket of ice? I can't tell you, these little things and teaching, less to make those things important is the difference between a great cocktail bar and just an okay one. And getting, hey, this bar makes pretty good drinks, or hey, this bar makes the best drinks in Washington, D.C. That's where that comes from. Lester's gonna maintain principles that keep the cocktail program at a high level, and he also is gonna give his bartenders always an opportunity to learn and grow and get better every day.
My goal is for any bartender that starts under me, when they leave, they make drinks that are 10 times better than mine. The rest of the world is happy.
You're making the world a better place by spreading the truth about great drinks to your bar staff.
I want to be like Ben and be able to go to a bar later on where I train someone who trained someone that made my drink.
And I want to invest in Lester's bar where he's doing that because I'm pretty sure it's going to be successful. And we always tell our staff, it's okay if you leave. We don't get mad if you leave. We're excited when you leave. We know that you're going to take what you've learned here and spread good things to the world. Either way, it's a win-win for the management staff. Our bar staff love that about working here. They love the fact that the doors were locked from the inside, I like to say. You want out, just unlock the door and go, man. It's all good. What do you think, Les? You ready to do this?
Oh, can't wait. I can't wait.
Yeah.
I mean, technically we started already, but still waiting.
Come see Reliable Tavern and what Les is up to. All right, Les, you know the drill. To better drinks. See you next time.